A typical mission that we flew out of England would begin at 4 o'clock in the morning. The sergeant quarters would come by, turn the lights on, and look at you and just shake his head yes, and didn't even have to ask the question. You knew you were on the mission. So the thing to do then was to get up, dress in the cold gray dawn, get on a bicycle or get on a 6x6 truck, go down to the mess hall, have a breakfast of powdered eggs and toast, go on to the briefing room, sit there until the commander came in. We would have a large map with a curtain over it, and we'd sit there and try to ponder where we'd be going today. At that time, when the commander came in and pulled the drape and we saw where we were going, generally there was a low moan because generally it was clear on the other side of Germany or Czechoslovakia, and would amount for about 11 hours sitting in the cockpit of the airplane. So after we had our briefing, on out to the airplane. By this time, the armors had been working overnight. They had loaded the bombs, had loaded the ammunition. We had our briefing as far as our times for start engines were concerned, start the taxi, take off, join up at a radio beacon over England, and the leader of our group would drop us into the formation stream, and off we would go. At the 10,000 feet, we would go on to oxygen, and would be on oxygen until we got back to 10,000 feet on the way home. If we were lucky enough to be going someplace in the North Sea, we would stay at lower altitudes and didn't have to immediately go to our max altitude. If we were going to someplace like Munich, Hamburg, or something in that area, we would have to start climbing immediately, get up to our altitude of 25 to 31,000 feet, and continue on into the target. Well, normally we went in a zigzag fashion to try to throw the German fighters and the flak guns off a little bit so they didn't know exactly where we were going, because regardless of when it was, we knew that the flak would be waiting for us when we got to the target.
The Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress is one of the most recognized airplanes of World War II. From Pearl Harbor to the end of the war, B-17s and their crews played an important role in the war effort. The prototype of the 4-engine heavy bomber was first rolled out in June 1935. Dubbed the Flying Fortress by a Seattle newspaper reporter, more than 12,700 B-17s were produced by war's end. Although small by today's standards, it was one of the largest airplanes used during World War II. On combat missions, B-17s normally carried a crew of 10. In the cockpit, the pilot, co-pilot, and flight engineer, who was also the top turret gunner. In the nose, the navigator and bombardier. Just behind the bomb bay, the radio operator. In the waist compartment, 2 gunners. A gunner in the ball turret, and finally, the tail gunner, who protected the rear of the airplane.
Well, it's a little lonely back in the tail, but I guess it's lonely any place when someone's shooting at you. It was great fun. I enjoyed flying. I enjoyed everything about flying except the part where they shoot at you. But you were the most isolated in the tail. The rest of the crew was more or less together, and you were sort of sitting back there alone. But it was a very important position because fighters could attack straight onto the tail, and the tail gunner was the only one that could fire at them. So I guess you could say that German fighter pilots liked to kill tail gunners because then the plane was vulnerable.
B-17 gunners shot down 23 enemy aircraft per 1,000 missions. This compares to 11 for B-24 gunners. By the end of the war, B-17s had flown more than 291,000 missions. In the years that followed the war, the scrapper's torch claimed many of the B-17s that had survived combat. Surplus airplanes were sold to civilian owners who used the B-17 in a variety of roles. Eventually, the airplanes were replaced in commercial service by more modern, less costly aircraft. Today, fewer than 100 B-17 airframes still exist, while a dozen B-17s remain airworthy. The B-17 aluminum overcast is owned and operated by the EAA Aviation Foundation, located in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. The airplane was delivered to the Army Air Corps in May of 1945. After being declared surplus, the airplane served a variety of civilian owners, hauling cargo in the Caribbean, performing aerial mapping in the Middle East, and was used as an aerial sprayer in the southern part of the United States. In 1978, the airplane was purchased by Dr. Bill Harrison, who, with a group of fellow investors, donated the airplane to EAA in 1981.
When I first got it, one of the first places we went was the Miami Air Races. And right before the races, Tony Guerreri had made arrangements to have some of the markings painted on it and the tail painted red. And George Roberts, who flew P-51s and still does fly P-51s, was flying formation with it. And he flew underneath it, and he said, "My God, it's like flying under an aluminum overcast." And so that was where it got its name.
The airplane has logged more than 1 million miles in more than 6,500 hours of flight time. It's currently painted in the colors of the 398th Bomb Group, but retains the nickname Aluminum Overcast.
Our restoration process in the last 5 months dealt with 2 different categories. The first being the first 2.5 months were spent in a very intensive airframe inspection, looking for corrosion and subsequent treatment of those areas. The remaining 2.5 months dealt with installing some of the equipment and furnishings that really makes our B-17 look quite a bit like a bomber.
Before each flight, the B-17 pilots and crew chief perform a detailed pre-flight inspection of the interior and exterior of the airplane.
Prior to the engine startup, we pull each engine through 9 blades to check for liquid locks, make sure that the all the oil doesn't drain down to the bottom of the cylinders and that we don't damage the engine on startup. I will visually check the oil levels, and I will dip the oil tanks to make sure we have the proper quantities of fuel for our next destination.
Our checklist is complete. Turn number 2.
Boost pump on number 2.
Boost pump on number 2.
Start.
Clear on number 2. Turning. Switch on number 2.
Inside the cockpit, one of the first things after starting the engines and you start to move, you'll hear a loud noise, a high-pitched noise, and what that is, the hydraulic system operating when you tap the brakes a little bit. The airplane is basically an electric airplane. The only 2 things on the airplane that are hydraulic are the cowl flaps and the brakes. And it is comforting feeling to hear the hydraulic pump actually working so that you don't come up with a surprise and wind up with no brakes. The checklist is not really complicated. It's very straightforward. But when you have 4 engines that you have to check the propellers, check the feathering system and the mags of each one, and as a crew, the pilot on the left seat and the pilot on the right seat, they work as a team. So after a very thorough checklist, we go and take position on the runway. You start to take off roll after the tail wheel's locked. You have your hands on the throttles, and you start the throttles up to 46 inches of manifold pressure, and you hear those 4 engines revving up, and away we go. We start rolling very slowly at first, but the airplane wants to fly.
targets were easily identified because there was a black cloud over the target, and that was all anti-aircraft fire, and we knew we had to fly through that. The fighters were coming up at us, the anti-aircraft, they were trying to get to us, and many of our people were lost on the way into the target. The big thing, of course, was to get our bombs on the target, accomplish the strategic part of it to try to destroy the factories, the manufacturing outlets, the ball bearing plants, the fuel dumps, the marshalling yards at the railroads, things of that nature. And after we dropped the bombs, we were much lighter, and we knew that from that point on, we had a better chance of staying in formation. It was easier to fly, even though we were more tired at the time. And we'd be coming downhill, so we didn't use as much fuel as we used on the way in. And we always felt that until we dropped the bombs, we were working for the government, and after we dropped the bombs, we were working for the wife and kids. And if you made it home from a situation like that, you were very, very fortunate.
You do the in-range checklist and then a landing checklist, and you're slowing the airplane down under 150 miles an hour for this aircraft. We're putting the landing gear down. In the flaps, the limit is 147, but we're using 140 miles an hour for extending of the flaps. And it's just like in any other airplane, you start to slow the aircraft down, you get down to around 120 to 130, and you put a quarter flap out. You turn the base leg a half and three-quarters, or however you spot the landing. And you're aiming for right around 100 miles an hour as you approach the end of the airport boundary. Taking once again your throttles and pulling them off. You're probably crossing the end of the runway right around 95 to 90. And just keep coming back on the wheel, and it'll three-point very, very nicely.
The B-17 means to me a lot of things. It means friendship with so many wonderful people who flew the airplane, people that I did not know. To me, at my age, having the opportunity to fly such a magnificent aircraft is an honor that all too few of us could ever enjoy.
In regards to the number of pilots that are current in the airplane that were World War II combat pilots, there's some discussion about that. Many feel that I may be the last of the breed. I don't know. We do know that the majority of the people currently involved in flying the aircraft are relatively new to the aircraft. When I say relatively new, that's all from my perspective, because I've been flying it for a little over 50 years now, so anything less than that is relatively new.
Flying the B-17 as a female, first of all, the opportunity, once again, was there just as it came along for the WASP during World War II. But when you get right down to it, I kind of forget sometimes that I'm different. I'm just a pilot flying an airplane. It happens to be a lady, and the airplane doesn't know the difference.
Having been married for a number of years, we've been very fortunate that we've been able to fly a lot of these old airplanes together. We've flown B-25s together, we've flown B-26s together, C-47s, B-17s, and we've flown Mustangs together. We're always asked, what's it like to fly with your wife? Well, I really don't fly with my wife. I fly with another pilot that happens to be my wife.
An airplane like this is a love affair. You can't say it's anything else. If you look at it as a means of transportation, you're going to be terribly disappointed. And so the only reason for doing something like this is because you truly love it. And I think it's home now. It's with other airplanes and people who care for it and love it as much as I do. But I don't think that, well, as Hal Weekly, I think, will agree that any World War II bomber pilot will feel right at home in this airplane.